I was the one who dug that report out from the bottom layer of Chloe's vanity drawer. It was pretty ironic, actually. I had gone home that afternoon to pick up a contract. Passing by the master bedroom, I noticed her vanity drawer was not fully closed, revealing a corner of a craft paper envelope. I had not planned to snoop, but she had told me before leaving that morning that she was going to the beauty salon. Yet I had clearly seen in the garage that the odometer on her white Porsche, the one she always drove, had clocked another 80 kilometers. The beauty salon was 15 kilometers from our place at most. At that moment, all I could think was, what on earth is this woman hiding from me? I opened the craft paper envelope. Inside was a pregnancy test report from Renai Hospital Reproductive Center. The first thing I saw was her name on the header. The second thing I saw was the gestational age column, 9 weeks and 3 days. I stood where I was and did the math. 9 weeks ago, we were in the middle of a Cold War. She had stayed at her parents' place for a solid 2 weeks without coming back. Then I saw the line at the very bottom. Biological father, Julian. I stared at those 6 words for at least 3 full minutes. To be honest, my first reaction was not anger. It was an indescribable sense of absurdity. Julian, her guy best friend, the Julian who was always running over to my house, the Julian who grinned and called me Ethan bro every time he saw me. I staggered back half a step. My lower back hit the handle of the vanity table, and the sharp pain made me suck in a cold breath. But that jolt of pain, ironically, cleared my head. I went through the report from start to finish again. I confirmed the official seal was real, the signature was real, and the testing ID number was real. Chloe was pregnant. The child was Julian's. I folded the craft paper envelope back exactly as I had found it and stuffed it into the gap of the drawer. Then I walked downstairs to the living room, sat on the sofa, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The ice cubes swirled twice in the glass. I did not take a single sip. I just sat there, holding the glass, staring out the floor to ceiling window at the garden. The white roses she had planted were in full bloom. I had specially commissioned a horticulturist to order the saplings from the Netherlands 3 years ago. I suddenly recalled an interview she had done with a financial media outlet last month. That video had gone viral. The title was "The Most Beautiful Chairwoman, Chloe, My Body, My Choice." In front of the camera, she had smiled with grace and composure and said, "Why on earth should I bear children for a man? The right to reproduce has always been a woman's own choice." The comments section was flooded with praise, calling her an independent and clear-headed queen. The top liked comment read, "This queen is so fierce." Fierce, indeed she was. She did not refuse to bear children for a man. She simply refused to bear children for me. But she had turned right around and gone to Julian for artificial insemination. My phone buzzed at that moment. It was a message from Chloe. Her tone was as sweet and cloying as ever. She wrote, "Honey, are you coming home for dinner tonight?" I asked the housekeeper to make soup. I looked at that message, flipped my phone over, and placed it face down on the coffee table. After sitting for another while, I got up and went to the study. My personal laptop stored the cloud backups of all the home surveillance footage. Only I knew the password. I pulled up the hallway footage from 3 months ago. I watched Chloe and Julian walk shoulder to shoulder into the master bedroom. They did not come out until 2 hours later. Julian was adjusting his shirt collar as he walked. The footage then cut to the living room, where the two of them were sitting on the sofa. Julian was holding an ultrasound sheet, pointing at it and gesturing. Chloe was laughing and patting him on the shoulder. I could guess exactly what those two were discussing, even without listening to the audio. I saved all the recordings onto an encrypted USB drive. Then I opened my email and sent a message to my private attorney. Attached was the photo I had just taken of the pregnancy test report. My attorney replied quickly. He wrote, "Ethan, this report has enough legal weight to serve as evidence in a divorce lawsuit. I suggest you stay quiet for now and wait for my advice before making any moves." I did not listen to him. I am not a man who can play dumb and swallow my anger. Besides, this empire was built by my own 2 hands. While she was out there basking in the glory of the Chairwoman title, I was the one behind the scenes carrying the entire group's operational pressure on my back. She liked being the Chairwoman, did she? Fine. Tomorrow, I would make her stand before the entire board of directors and explain clearly what exactly was going on between her and Julian. I shut down my laptop, walked to the walk-in closet, and pulled a carry-on suitcase from the very back of the wardrobe. Then I called my mother. I said, "Mum, I am staying at your place for the next few days. Yes, just me. Don't ask why. I will tell you when I see you." I hung up, poured the whiskey down the sink, rinsed the glass and placed it upside down on the drying rack. The soup the housekeeper had been simmering was still warming on the stove in the kitchen. The aroma drifted over. I suddenly felt a little nauseous. I waited in the living room until 8:40 in the evening. The lock turned. Chloe walked in on her stilettos, holding the latest Hermes handbag. She was startled to see me sitting on the sofa. She asked, "Why are you sitting here alone in the dark? Why didn't you turn on the lights?" She reached for the light switch. I said, "Don't turn them on. I have something to ask you." She laughed as she walked closer, carrying a trace of a men's cologne I could not identify. She said, "What is so serious?" "Julian told me today that the board is going to discuss the South China branch budget next week. Have you prepared your materials yet?" The moment I heard the name Julian slip so naturally from her lips, I nearly laughed out loud. I said, "Let's put the budget aside for a moment." I turned on my phone screen and showed her the photo of the pregnancy test report. I said, "First, tell me what this is all about." Chloe's smile froze on her face in an instant. The living room was so quiet you could hear the second hand ticking on the wall clock. Her lips moved. After a long pause, she squeezed out a single sentence. She said, "You went through my things." I stood up. At 185 centimeters, I towered a full head above her. I looked down at her and spoke with a calm that even surprised myself. I said, "Whether I went through your things is not the point. The point is, right now, shouldn't you be giving me an explanation?" Chloe stumbled backward 2 steps. The sound of her high heels clicking on the marble floor echoed crisply. The panic on her face lasted about 5 seconds at most. Then it was rapidly replaced by an expression of grievance. To be honest, in 3 years of marriage, I had seen this face far too many times. Every time she messed something up outside, every time she made a decision on her own that caused a project to fail, she would look at me exactly like this. Her eyes reddening, her lips trembling slightly, like a startled fawn. She said, "Honey, let me explain. It is not what you think." I sat back down on the sofa, crossed my legs, and folded my hands over my knee. I said, "Fine. Explain. I am listening." She took a deep breath and sat down on the single sofa across from me. Her hands gripped the strap of her platinum bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She said, "Julian is my friend. You have always known that. There is nothing between us. I just wanted a child so badly. So you went to him for it." I could not help but cut her off. She said, "It is not the kind of relationship you are imagining." Tears began to roll down from her reddened eyes. She said, "We did it through proper medical channels. It was artificial insemination. I did not want to be a burden to you. Did you not always say you were too distracted by the company's expansion to think about kids? I went and did this on my own, precisely because I did not want to make things difficult for you." The logic behind that statement was quite simply the most absurd thing on earth. I stared into her eyes and said, "You did not want to make things difficult for me. So you got pregnant with a child that is not mine. Then you continued living in my house, driving my car and holding the title of chairwoman of my company. Do you think that makes any sense at all? Did you ever truly see me as your husband?" She froze right there. Tears were still on her face, but that fake, pitiful expression finally cracked open a fissure. I saw the corner of her eye twitch. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This was the real her. Once she was exposed, she first panicked, then got angry and finally turned hysterical. Her voice suddenly spiked as she said, "How dare you interrogate me like this? Ethan, do you think I don't know? Who is the one you have had in your heart all these years? That female president, Serena. You two are always going on business trips together. Do you think I'm blind?" I just never said anything. I laughed out of sheer anger at her words. I said Serena and I travel together because she is the responsible person for our partner company. Every contract has both of our teams present. What about you? You and Julian spent 2 hours in the bedroom and came out fixing your clothes. What do you call that? Clothes face drained of all color, she asked. Were you spying on me? I said, the hallway surveillance in my own home. I stood up and looked down at her from my full height. I said, what's the matter? Are you afraid of people seeing what you do in your own house? At that moment, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper went to open the door. Sure enough, it was Julian who walked. He was wearing a dark blue cashmere coat and was carrying a dessert box in his hand. Seeing the hostile standoff in the living room, he was visibly stunned. He said, Ethan bro, you are here too. Sister Chloe asked me to bring some desserts. Before he could finish, his eyes landed on the magnified pregnancy test report displayed on my phone screen. The dessert box slipped from his hand and smashed onto the floor. Cream from the tiramisu splattered everywhere. I said, Julian, perfect timing. I walked toward him without any rush. I said, explain this to me. Why did you do artificial insemination with my wife without ever consulting me beforehand? He instinctively backed up half a step. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He said, Ethan bro, about this matter. Chloe and I were indeed inconsiderate. But our intentions were genuine. It was truly for the sake of a child. I raised a hand to cut him off. I said, stop right there. First, don't call me bro. I share zero blood relation with you. Second, this so-called inconsideration you mentioned refers to the time you waited until I was away on a business trip. You and my wife walked into the master bedroom together and did something that legally requires my signed consent. Proper artificial insemination requires a signed spousal informed consent form. You two did this at the reproductive center of Renai Hospital, correct? Who signed that consent form? Julian's face completely changed color. He glanced at Chloe, and Chloe glanced back at him. They exchanged a look I could read perfectly well. They were silently checking with each other to see if the other had leaked the secret. Chloe stood up, her voice softening again. She said, Ethan, I can explain the signing part. I asked a friend to help me. They signed a proxy name. It was because I knew you would never agree. I said, of course I would never agree. I turned around to look at her, enunciating each word with absolute clarity. I said, you are my wife. We are not yet divorced. You went behind my back to carry another man's child. This behavior has 2 names under the law. One is violation of marital fidelity. The other is adultery. Even if you deny the affair, you know better than I do whether a court will accept the artificial insemination excuse. Julian stepped forward, trying to position himself between me and Chloe. He said, Ethan, we are all adults. Matters of the heart cannot be forced. Chloe chose me to be the father of her child. That is her right. I looked at that well-maintained face of his and suddenly found it a little amusing. 6 months ago, this man was just an account manager at a small advertising agency. It was Chloe who brought him into Voyager Group as the procurement director. His monthly salary jumped from $10,000 to $80,000. The car he drove went from a Corolla to a Porsche. Everything he had was built on freeloading. And now he was standing in front of me talking about rights. I said, fine. She chose you to be the father of her child. That is her choice. I picked up my briefcase from the sofa and pulled out 2 sheets of A4 paper. I said, this is the divorce agreement I have already signed. Take your time reading through the asset division part. But here is a friendly reminder. 65% of Voyager Group's shares are under my name, not Chloe's. That chairwoman position of hers was something I gave her. I can take it back any time. Chloe rushed over and grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my wrist. She screamed, "You cannot do this to me. I am your wife. I ran this household with you. Let go of me." I gently pried her hand off and guided her to sit down on the sofa. Then I picked up the carry-on suitcase I had prepared long ago and walked toward the door. As I passed by Julian, I stopped and turned my head slightly. I said one sentence to him. I said, "Sit tight in that procurement director seat for a few more days. In a few days, I will treat you to a nice cup of tea." The muscles on his face stiffened for a split second. I did not look back again. I pushed open the villa's front door. The night breeze hit my face, and I took a deep breath. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my attorney. It said, "Ethan, tomorrow's board meeting agenda has been arranged according to your wishes." I replied with one word: received. Then I got into the car, started the engine, and drove out of the residential compound I had lived in for 3 years. In the rearview mirror, the lit house grew farther and farther away. I suddenly felt that the boulder pressing on my chest for the past 3 years had finally loosened, even if just a little. 9:30 the next morning, conference room number 3 of Voyager Group. By the time I arrived, both sides of the oval conference table were already full. The 7 independent directors, 2 supervisors, the group's legal director Old Joe, and several top executives from core departments. Every single one was present, not a person missing. I swept a glance over the seating arrangement and immediately knew what was going on. Chloe was sitting in the chairwoman's seat. Julian was sitting, unprecedentedly, in the first seat to her right. According to company regulations, a procurement director did not even have the qualification to sit in on a board meeting. Old Joe saw me walk in and gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. I returned his look and walked straight to the other end of the conference table, pulling out a chair to sit down. I was directly opposite Chloe. 3 meters of black lacquered tabletop stretched between us like an invisible rift valley. Chloe was wearing a white business suit that day. Her hair was meticulously pinned up, and her makeup was flawlessly polished. If I had not seen her panic-stricken face at home yesterday, judging by her current appearance alone, she truly looked the part of a chairwoman. She opened the folder in front of her and spoke with a tone as steady as a news anchor reading a script. She said, "Today's board meeting will primarily address the group's organizational restructuring. Before we enter the formal agenda, I have a provisional motion to raise." She tilted her hand slightly toward Julian and said, "Julian, go ahead." Julian stood up and pulled a document from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He cleared his throat. I noticed his fingers were trembling slightly, but his expression was doing its best to maintain composure. He said, "Esteemed directors, I have here an investigative report regarding the group's founder, Ethan, who over the past 6 months has misappropriated company funds for personal investments without authorization." He pushed the document along the table toward us. He said, "The amount involved reaches 37 million yuan, funneled into 3 shell companies with absolutely no connection to the group's core business." As the chairwoman of Voyager Group, Chloe has the right to pursue accountability for this matter. Therefore, I propose the immediate dismissal of Ethan from all positions within the group and the initiation of an internal audit. The conference room fell silent for about 3 seconds. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands across my stomach, and said absolutely nothing. Old Joe pushed his glasses up and flipped through that report for a moment. A nearly invisible smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then, Independent Director Zhao spoke up first. Old Zhao was the earliest investor in Voyager Group. Back then, I had cornered him in a coffee shop with my business plan for 4 straight hours before he agreed to put in the first angel round. Everyone in the boardroom knew exactly how much weight he carried. He asked to Director Julian, "These 3 shell companies you mentioned, where exactly are they registered?" Julian froze for a second. He replied, "They are in Qianhai, Shenzhen." Old Zhao asked, "Who is the legal representative?" Julian's Adam's apple started bobbing again as he said, "That is still under verification." Old Zhao tossed the report in his hand onto the table. It landed with a sharp slap. He said, "No need to verify anything. These 3 companies are the holding platforms for Voyager Group's South China supply chain system. It was a structural plan that Ethan and I jointly pushed through during last year's board meeting. You can pull the meeting minutes from the admin department. It was the 3rd board meeting this year. Resolution number 11. Julian's face went from white to green, then from green to ashen grey. Chloe whipped her head around to stare at Julian. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. She clearly had no idea that the contents of that report were so pathetically fragile. Only then did I speak. My voice was not loud, but in the silent conference room, every word was crystal clear. I said, "Julian, you are the procurement director. You do not even understand the corporate structure of the group's own holding companies, and yet you come to a board meeting to make accusations.
With this kind of work competency, do you honestly believe you deserve your monthly salary of 80,000?
You." Julian opened his mouth to retort, but found absolutely nothing to say. I stood up, planted both hands on the table, and swept my gaze across the faces of the 7 directors one by one. I said, "Everyone, yesterday some private matters occurred between my wife Chloe and myself. I do not intend to discuss them in a business setting. But since someone has chosen to mix family matters with company business, I will make things clear right here today. First, 65% of Voyager Group's shares are under my name. I am the actual controller of this company. Second, Chloe's role as chairwoman is based on a division of operational duties during the period of our marital relationship. Third, if this farce continues, I will not hesitate to call for a shareholders' meeting to re-vote on the chairmanship." After I finished, the legal director, Old Joe, rose to his feet. He pulled a document from his briefcase. His voice was as steady as a judge's. He said, "Esteemed directors, according to Article 19 of the company's charter, the appointment or dismissal of any senior executive must be approved by a 2/3 majority vote of the board. Furthermore, the founding shareholder holds a 1-vote veto right. The statement made by Director Julian today holds no legal validity whatsoever in procedural terms." Chloe's composure finally shattered. She shot to her feet. The heel of her stiletto knocked against the chair leg with a dull thud. She shouted, "Old Joe, what is the meaning of this?" "I am the chairwoman." Old Joe looked at her. His tone was respectful, but his stance was unwavering. He said, "Chairwoman Chloe, precisely because you are the chairwoman, I must remind you that a board meeting is not a venue for resolving marital disputes. The statements made by Mr. Ethan just now are entirely legal and compliant." At that moment, the other 6 directors stood up, one after another. Old Zhao stood up and walked over to stand behind me. Director Liu stood up and walked over behind me. Director Qian, Director Sun, Director Li, Supervisor Zhou, Supervisor Wu. One by one, they all moved to this side of the conference table. 7 people. Like 7 solid walls lined up firmly at my back. Julian stared at this scene. His lips trembled for a long while, before he squeezed out a few words. He stammered, "You people, this is forming a faction." No one paid him any attention. I picked up my briefcase from the table. As I passed by Chloe, I paused for a second. She lifted her head to look at me. There was a watery glint in her eyes, but those were not tears of remorse. It was a mixture of fury and terror. I lowered my voice and said one sentence to her. I said, "This chairwoman's seat, I gave it to you, and you sat comfortably. Now I am taking it back. You are going to have to swallow that." With that, I strode out of the conference room. Chloe's voice rang out from behind me, sharp and distorted. She screamed, "Ethan, stop right there. This is not over." I did not look back. At the end of the hallway, the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. The sunlight was just right, flooding the entire space with brilliance. I pressed the elevator button. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "Ethan, this is Serena. I heard about what happened yesterday. If you need any help, reach out any time." I did not reply. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stepped into the elevator. It took less than 48 hours from the close of the board meeting for Chloe to bring people to my door. Those 2 days I stayed at my mother's place. I cleared out the backlog of contracts for the company and discussed the strategy for the upcoming divorce lawsuit in detail with old Zoe. Everything was progressing methodically. Then, at 3 in the afternoon on the third day, the doorbell rang like a non-stop siren. My mother went to answer the door. The moment the door opened a crack, it was violently shoved inward from the outside. Chloe's mother, Wang Meilan, charged in first. She wore a bright red printed jacket. The expression on her face looked ready to devour someone alive. Right behind her was Chloe's father, Chen Jianguo. He clutched an unlit cigarette between his fingers, his face dark and gloomy. Last was Chloe herself. She wore no makeup. Her face was bare, her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was tied back in a careless ponytail. She was a world apart from the polished image she had projected in the boardroom. Wang Meilan's voice was sharp and ear-piercing as she shrieked, "Ethan, you little brat, get out here!" I walked out of the study and leaned against the hallway wall, folding my arms across my chest. I said, "What are you yelling for? This is a residential building, not a vegetable market." Wang Meilan spotted me, and her eyes bulged like brass bells. She spat out, "You still have the nerve to show your face. My daughter has been married to you for 3 years, and now you say you want a divorce. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Back when you were starting your business, who lent you the money to get through the cash flow crisis? It was my daughter." I replied flatly, "It was 300,000 borrowed. Half a year later, I paid back 400,000 with every cent of interest accounted for. It was a loan, not a gift. If you cannot remember clearly, I can have the bank pull up the transfer records."
Wang
Meilan choked on her words for a second, but quickly switched angles to continue her assault. She said, "Fine, even if the money was paid back, what about the emotional debt? My daughter gave you the 3 best years of her life. Now that you are bored, you want to dump her."
Let me tell you, Ethan, there is no such cheap deal in this world.
Chloe stepped forward at this point and pulled her mother's arm. Her voice was tearful as she said, "Mum, stop it. Let me talk to him." She turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were red again. She said, "Ethan, can we just talk properly? Just the 2 of us. Let's talk calmly." My mother stood to the side and glanced at me. I gave her a reassuring look and tilted my head toward the study. I said, "Let's talk inside." The study was not large. A mahogany desk took up half the space. Chloe entered, shut the door behind her, and leaned her back against it, keeping her head lowered without speaking. I sat down behind the desk, pulled open a drawer, and took out the signed divorce agreement I had prepared earlier. "I placed it on the desktop," I said. "The asset division is written very clearly. This house goes to you. The 2-bedroom apartment in the city center also goes to you. Take your pick of the 2 cars. The savings are split 50-50. The shares in Voyager Group have nothing to do with you. Those are pre-marital assets combined with my personal operational accumulation. You contributed 0 substantive work." She lifted her head. Tears streamed down her cheek. She said, "Ethan, are you really this heartless? We have been together for 3 years. Is there truly not a shred of affection left? I admit what I did with Julian was wrong, but I only wanted a child." I cut her off. I said, "Then why didn't you tell me? You are my wife. You want a child, you tell me. You don't want to have one with me, you can also tell me. But you chose the most disgusting path possible. You went behind my back to find another man, and then justified it by calling it your right. Chloe, the one who destroyed this marriage, is not me." Her lips quivered violently. Her chest heaved. After a few seconds of silence, her expression suddenly shifted. The tears stopped, but the corner of her mouth curved into a smile I had never seen before. She said, "Ethan, have you ever thought about what your reputation will look like when the court grants this divorce? I am the chairwoman of Voyager Group. What will the media write? Founder abandons pregnant wife. Do you like that headline?" I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. I said, "Are you threatening me?" she said. I am not threatening you. I am telling you the consequences. She pulled a USB drive from her bag and tossed it onto the desk. She said, "This contains private photos of you entertaining a certain government official 3 years ago during negotiations for the Industrial Park project. Tell me, if I hand this over to the media, how many points will Voyager's stock price drop?" I picked up the USB drive, turned it over in my hand, then gently set it back down. I said, "Feel free to hand it to the media. That dinner had invoices for every single expense. 6 people spent 2,400 yuan. That's 400 per person, not exceeding any regulatory standards. I can send these photos to you directly myself, because my conscience is clean." The last card she had to play had just been torn to shreds right in front of her face. A commotion erupted from outside the study. Wang Meilan had swept everything off the coffee table in the living room. My mother was shaking with rage. Chen Jiangguo stood there chain-smoking without a word, ashes falling everywhere. I opened the study door and walked out. Before I could even open my mouth, Chloe suddenly rushed out from behind me and burst into the kitchen. By the time I reacted, she was already standing in the center of the living room, gripping that fruit knife in her hand. The tip of the blade was pressed against the inside of her own left wrist. Her voice, sharp and trembling, mixed with a fresh wave of tears, pierced the air. She cried, "Ethan, if you insist on a divorce today, I will cut myself right here. I mean it." Wang Meilan let out a shriek and lunged forward, screaming, "Daughter, don't do anything rash," but Chloe blocked her with her other hand. Everyone in the room froze solid. I stood where I was, looking directly into her eyes. Inside those eyes, there was no genuine resolve to face death. There was only a madness that bordered on performance. I had seen too many bluffing tactics at the negotiation table. Chloe's skills were nowhere near that level. I took out my phone and dialed 3 digits. I said, "Hello, 120. I have a pregnant woman here who is emotionally out of control and holding a knife threatening self-harm." "Correct, I will provide the address." Chloe was stunned. The tip of the knife trembled against her wrist. After hanging up, I looked at her and said, "The ambulance will be here in 3 minutes. If you want to cut, go ahead. Once you do, they can take you straight to the hospital. But I must remind you, you are carrying a child. That single cut of yours will hurt more than just yourself." Her fingers slowly loosened. The fruit knife clattered to the floor tiles with a metallic ring. After Chloe and her parents were sent away by the ambulance crew and the property security, I stood in the wrecked living room and remained silent for a very long time. The coffee table was overturned. 2 vases were smashed. The set of blue and white porcelain teacups my mother had collected for years had been swept to the floor. 2 of the cups were chipped. I crouched down and picked up the broken shards piece by piece, putting them into the trash bin. My mother came over and pulled me up. She said, "Don't pick those up. You will cut your hands. These things are all external possessions. You are unharmed, and that is what matters." I held her hand. I could not describe what I felt in my heart. But what truly turned me ice cold was not the wrecked living room. It was not Chloe's knife. It was the phone call I received from my legal director, Old Joe, later that evening. Old Joe said, "Ethan, the matter you asked me to secretly investigate has yielded results." I stood by the study window, my phone pressed to my ear. Outside the window, the city lights merged into a continuous glow. I said, "Go ahead." Old Zeus' voice was low, but every word drove into my eardrum like a nail. He said, "In the 11 months since Julian assumed the role of procurement director at Voyager Group, he has handled a total of 173 procurement contracts. Among them, 69 show clear irregularities. He employed a highly practiced method of skimming price differences through multiple suppliers. For example, Company A quotes the price, Company B wins the bid. But the actual supplier delivering the goods remains Company A. The price differential was channeled under various pretexts into his own connected accounts. I asked, "What is the total amount?" He replied, Preliminary calculations placed the sum of kickbacks and embezzled company funds at no less than 26,400,000 yuan. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. 26,400,000. That figure was far larger than I had anticipated. More critically, every single one of these transactions occurred during Chloe's tenure as chairwoman. Every procurement approval form bore her handwritten signature. I asked, "Is the evidence solid?" He replied, 100% solid. I have obtained the complete chain of funds flow for 32 of these transactions. Bank records, invoice stubs, supplier testimony. It all matches up perfectly. He paused before adding, "Ethan, this evidence is more than sufficient to trigger the criminal filing threshold for commercial bribery. Under Article 163 of the criminal law, a non-state employee who exploits their position to accept kickbacks when the amount is enormous faces a minimum sentence of 3 years. I said, "That is enough." I turned around and walked back to my desk, opening my laptop. I said, "Old Joe, organize all the materials into a digital file and send them to me. Also draft a formal criminal complaint for me. Address the header to the Municipal Economic Crimes Division." Old Joe was silent on the other end for a few seconds. He asked, "Are you serious? Once this enters the criminal justice process, there is no turning back. And Chloe, as the signing approver, will not escape accessory liability," I said. "She must bear the responsibility for her own signature. What I want to do is very simple. Let those who deserve to pay the price pay it." After hanging up, I sat alone in the study until 2 in the morning. I read through every single page of the materials Old Joe sent. The ins and outs of every kickback were laid out with absolute clarity. It was laughable, really, how Julian operated. His methods for taking kickbacks were not even sophisticated. The reason he could operate so freely within the group for nearly a year was entirely due to the protective umbrella provided by Chloe. The purchase orders landed on her desk. She signed them without even glancing at them. It was not that she trusted Julian. It was simply that she did not care how the company's money was spent. In her eyes, this company had nothing to do with her. Spending Ethan's assets did not hurt a bit. Unfortunately, she forgot one thing. Every cent of this company's profits was earned through the blood and sweat of me and my team. Trying to play the internal parasite game with me, she picked the wrong target. At exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, carrying a full archive box of materials, I walked into the reporting hall of the Municipal Economic Crimes Division. The officer who received me was an economic crimes investigator in his 40s, Officer Liao. The rank insignia on his shoulders was not low. I placed the materials on the table and got straight to the point. I said, "Officer Liao, I am here to report Julian, the procurement director of Voyager Group, for exploiting his position during his tenure to accept massive kickbacks from suppliers. The amount involved exceeds 26 million yuan. The evidence is complete." Officer Liao picked up the materials and flipped through them. His expression quickly changed. He pulled a pair of reading glasses from his drawer and put them on. He carefully examined the funds flow and contract comparison tables from start to finish. Then he raised his head and looked at me. He asked, "What is your position in this company?" I replied, "Founder and actual controller, Ethan." He nodded, stood up and shook my hand. He said, "Mr. Ethan, thank you for filing this report under your real name. We accept these materials. As per regulations, we will initiate a preliminary investigation. Please ensure your communication lines remain open within the next 7 working days." I said 7 working days will not be necessary. I pulled out the document at the very bottom of the archive box and placed it in front of him. I said, "This is the detailed bank transaction statement of the kickbacks Julian received through his personal linked accounts. The receiving account belongs to his mother's pension account. The time difference between every single deposit and the signing date of the corresponding procurement contract does not exceed 48 hours. I believe this constitutes a sufficiently clear evidentiary chain." Officer Liao lowered his head and studied the papers for a moment. He pressed the internal phone on his desk and said, "Xiao Zhang, bring 2 people from your team over here." We have an economic crime case. Register the materials immediately." When I stepped out of the Economic Crimes Division building, the sunlight was perfect. I turned back to glance at the building bearing the national emblem. An indescribable sense of relief washed over my heart. 3 years of marriage. I had always thought Chloe was just not bright enough, easily manipulated by others, overly obsessed with saving face. But today, I finally understood completely. Her problem was never about stupidity. It was about malice, a kind of malice that felt utterly at ease trampling over other people's bottom lines. I got into the car. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Serena. She wrote, "I heard you filed a police report. If you need legal counsel, I know several top-tier lawyers specializing in economic crime." I hesitated for a moment and replied, "Thanks. When things settle on my end, let me buy you coffee." The instant I sent that message, I suddenly realized it was the first time in 3 years of marriage that I had agreed to have coffee alone with another woman. I started the engine. The car slowly pulled out of the parking lot. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was old Joe. He wrote, "Ethan, the Economic Crimes Division just called to schedule an interview. It is set for next Monday. Also, Chloe's parents showed up at the company this afternoon, causing a scene. Security stopped them outside. The police were called." I sent a voice message back. I said effective immediately. Upgrade the entire access control system at Voyager Group's headquarters. Revoke all facial recognition permissions for Chloe and her family members. All internal approval processes are to revert back to my direct authorization model. After sending it, I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. The car merged onto the elevated highway, heading straight toward Voyager Tower. The wind rushed in through the half-opened window, blowing my tie backward. I reached up and loosened the knot. I suddenly felt as if I had shed a burden that had been weighing on my back for far too long. This empire was built inch by inch with my own 2 hands. Today, I was going to reclaim it inch by inch, starting from the procurement department, ending at the chairwoman's office, leaving not a single corner behind. 4 days after I filed the police report, things exploded in a direction I had not anticipated at all. That morning I was heading to the office as usual. Before my car even reached the entrance of Voyager Tower, I spotted a massive crowd gathered outside the main gate. A rough estimate put it at 40 to 50 people at least. Some held up smartphone tripods. Some carried portable fill lights. A few guys in vests were weaving through the crowd. You could tell at a glance they were professional outdoor live streamers. I slowed the car and saw 3 people standing at the very center of the crowd. Chloe's father, Chen Jianguo, her mother, Wang Meilan, and a man with a tiny mustache I had never seen before. In his hands, he held a wrinkled cardboard sign with several large characters scrawled in fluorescent marker. It read, "Voyager Group founder Ethan cheats on wife with female CEO, abandons pregnant first wife." To be honest, when I saw that sign, I nearly laughed out of sheer disbelief. Not because I was angry, but because the absurdity of this situation had completely exceeded my imagination. I sat in the car with the windows rolled up. The noise from outside filtered through the glass, sounding like a swarm of flies buzzing. The mustached man was holding his phone and shouting hoarsely at the camera. He yelled, "Family, watch closely." This is the entrance of Voyager Group. The person behind me is the father of the victim, Chloe. His daughter is the chairwoman of Voyager Group. She is pregnant and was forcibly thrown out of her home by founder Ethan. Not only that, Ethan is messing around with a female CEO named Serena. This is a direct baulio from the first wife herself. Chen Jianguo stood beside him, his expression as wooden as ever, but his mouth was cooperating perfectly. He said, "My daughter married him for 3 years. She did nothing wrong. He found someone else outside. That woman, that's Serena, the 2 of them stayed in the same hotel on business trips. Everyone in the company knows. The 2 of us old folks came here today just to demand justice." Wang Meilan was even more dramatic. She sat down directly on the ground, slapped her thigh, and began wailing loudly. She cried, "Heavens, open your eyes. The rich bully the common people. My daughter is still pregnant. There is no way we can go on living." The crowd of onlookers grew larger. The security captain of Voyager Tower, Old Han, stood blocking the entrance with 3 of his men. His face was steely. He spotted my car parked by the roadside and jogged over quickly. He bent down and leaned close to the car window. He said, "Boss Ethan, please do not get out of the car. These people are just trying to provoke you. The moment you show your face, they will become even more frenzied. I have already called the police. Officers from the local police station should be on their way." I nodded and lowered the window a tiny crack. I said, "Old Han, tell your men to maintain order. Do not engage in any physical contact with them. If anyone so much as bumps into them, they could spin 80 different stories by tomorrow. Also, notify the surveillance room to send me real-time footage from all cameras at the entrance." He replied, "Understood." I sat in the car, watching this farce through the tinted windows. That mustached streamer was clearly a veteran. He knew exactly how to manufacture conflict and manipulate the audience's emotions. One moment, he shoved the camera into Chen Jianguo's face, telling him to say again how pitiful his daughter was. The next, he aimed the lens at the golden sign of Voyager Tower, shouting for viewers to send gifts while he sought justice on their behalf. The comment section was probably blowing up already. I did not need to look to know what kind of comments were flooding the screen. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Serena. She wrote, "Ethan, someone is live streaming outside your company gate. I saw it. This matter involves me. I am coming over immediately." I called her back instantly. She picked up after a single ring. I said, "Serena, this has nothing to do with you. You do not need to come. They are just trying to drag you into the mud. If you show up, you will be playing right into their hands." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Serena's voice came through. Her tone was so calm it did not sound like she was talking about something that concerned herself. She said, "Ethan, I have secretly loved you for so many years. Today I finally have a legitimate reason to stand up and say a few words."
What right do you have to stop me?
She hung up. I sat in the driver's seat holding my phone, completely stunned. What did she just say? Outside, the farce was still going on. Chen Jianguo, probably gaining momentum from running his mouth, started throwing even filthier accusations at me. He yelled that Ethan, don't be fooled by his polished appearance. He is actually an ungrateful wretch. Back when he was starting his business, he ate our family's food and lived under our roof. Now that he has made it big, he wants to kick us aside. He is even a domestic abuser. The bruises on my daughter's arm are the proof. The moment those words left his mouth, a wave of buzzing discussion erupted among the onlookers. Several bystanders holding up their phones pushed their lenses even closer. I sat in the car, both hands gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles turned white. I heard every single word Chen Jianguo said with perfect clarity. With every extra sentence he spoke, the surveillance audio evidence in my possession gained one more count of defamation. My mother raised me, teaching me one thing. When a dog bites you, you do not crouch down and bite it back. You stand tall. The higher it jumps, the harder it falls. The police car from the local station finally arrived. 2 officers got out and attempted to disperse the crowd. The mustached streamer, seeing the police approach, started shouting even louder. He screamed, "Family, look at this! The police are here to protect the interests of the capitalists. Is it really this hard for ordinary folks like us to fight for our rights?" Wang Meilan seized the opportunity and lunged forward, grabbing the sleeve of a young officer. She cried, "Comrade police officer, you have to give us justice. My daughter's husband keeps a mistress outside. It is an outrage against heaven." The young officer, his face full of exasperation, carefully pulled his sleeve free. He said, "Ma'am, please calm down first. Any issues can be resolved through proper legal channels." Gathering a crowd to cause a disturbance outside someone's company entrance is an act of disrupting public order. I must ask you to put down that sign first." Right at that moment, a silver-grey Mercedes sedan silently pulled up on the outer edge of the crowd. The car door opened. What came out first was a pair of cream-colored high heels, then the crisp crease of tailored trousers. Finally, the full silhouette of the person. Serena was wearing a sharply cut navy blue blazer. Her hair was neatly tucked behind her ears. Her face held no superfluous expression. She carried an archive envelope in her hand and walked unhurriedly toward the center of the crowd. The mustached streamer spotted her first. His phone lens whipped around instantly. He shouted, "Hey, hey, hey, could this be the legendary female CEO Serena?" "Family, today's live stream is pure gold." The main subject herself has arrived. The crowd parted automatically to make way. Serena walked up to the cardboard sign. She lowered her head and glanced at the words on it. Then she lifted her head and gave the mustached streamer's phone camera a faint smile. That smile was very light, but on the live stream footage, it was probably stunning enough to make it impossible to look away. She said, "That is right, I am Serena." She spoke, and her voice was not loud, but the surroundings suddenly went quiet. She continued, "Mr. Streamer, you said just now that I am Ethan's mistress. Is that correct?" The mustached streamer clearly had not expected her to ask it so directly. He froze for a second before reacting. He quickly shoved the camera even closer, his tone brimming with excitement. He said, "Yes, yes, yes. Ms. Serena, what exactly is your relationship with Voyager Group founder Ethan? Close family has boldly out that you two have an improper relationship." Serena finished his sentence for him. Then she gently shook her head. She said, "Sir, you are live streaming right now, yes." "Well, that is perfect. There are some things I want to make crystal clear today in front of everyone." She opened the archive envelope and pulled out a stack of neatly bound documents. Through the car window, I could not make out the specifics, but I could see it was documentation with the Renai Hospital Reproductive Center letterhead. It was the exact same format as that pregnancy test report I had dug out before, she said. "First of all, Mr. Ethan and I have been partners for 5 years. We have never had any personal contact beyond the scope of our business collaboration. You can go check every single meeting minute and travel record right now. See if you can find a single instance where the two of us were alone." Her voice was clear and forceful. Her pace was unhurried, but every word landed with weight. She continued, "My personal bottom line is very clear. A married man, no matter how capable, belongs to someone else." Someone in the crowd muttered, "This woman talks pretty tough." Serena paid no attention to the murmuring around her and pressed on. She said, "Secondly, I did not come here today to clear my own name. This kind of low and vile slander cannot hurt my reputation. I came because there is something I have kept hidden for far too many years. Today, I finally do not have to hide it anymore." She took a breath and said a single sentence into the camera. Her tone was as candid as if she were remarking on the day's weather. She said, "I do have feelings for Ethan. I have had them since the first time I saw him at an industry summit 5 years ago. I am 31 years old this year. I am still single. Because aside from him, I have never truly felt anything for anyone else." The crowd erupted into an uproar. The mustached streamer's jaw dropped into an O shape. The comments section was probably going absolutely insane. But Serena raised her volume and cut through the surrounding clamor. She said, "My feelings for him are my own business. They have nothing to do with him. In these 5 years, I have never shown him any indication of my feelings, because he was married. In the business world, I, Serena, fight tooth and nail, but in matters of the heart, I will never be the other woman. The reason I am standing here today saying all this is because some people are using my name as a weapon to throw dirt on a thoroughly decent man, and that I absolutely cannot tolerate." She pulled out a second document from the archive envelope and held it up high, making sure everyone's cameras could capture it clearly. She announced, This is the complete archive of Chloe's artificial insemination procedure at the Reproductive Center of Renai Hospital. It includes a copy of the informed consent form. On it is only Chloe's own signature. There is no signature from her spouse, Ethan, and the sperm provider's information is written in black and white right here. The name is Julian. Feel free to take screenshots and zoom in if you want. This document has been notarized. It carries full legal weight. The live stream chat room completely exploded. The crowd's murmuring escalated from a buzz to an outright clamor. Everyone was whispering to the person next to them. Someone shouted, "Holy crap, what a plot twist!" Others raised their phones to frantically snap screenshots. Wang Meilan's face turned white in an instant. She scrambled up from the ground, pointed at Serena, and shrieked at the top of her lungs. She screamed, "She is lying. That document is forged. She and Ethan are in cahoots. Don't believe her." Serena turned around and looked at Wang Meilan. Her tone was calm and even. She said, "Auntie, whether the document is real or fake, you are welcome to go to Renai Hospital to retrieve the original copy. The hospital's official seal, the doctor's signature, the timestamp of the file creation. Every single aspect can be verified. If I have committed forgery, I will willingly bear all legal consequences." Wang Meilan opened her mouth but could not utter a single word. Chen Jiangguo stood to the side. His cigarette burned down to his fingers before he noticed. He jolted and threw the butt to the ground. His face cycled through shades of blue and white. He had probably never imagined that the dirty water he splashed out would be swatted back by Serena with a single stack of documents. The force of the rebound was so great, it splattered all over his own face. Serena put away the documents and spoke her final piece to the camera. She said, "I came here today not to whitewash anyone's reputation. I am here to lay out the facts for everyone to see. In this world, there is no wall so tight that wind cannot pass through. The things you think you can hide from everyone will one day be flipped open from the direction you least expect. Friends in the live stream room, you have the right to know the truth, rather than being used as weapons by certain people." After saying this, she turned and walked toward the roadside. When she passed my car, her footsteps paused for a single beat. Through the dark, tinted windows, she could not see me, but I could see her. The corners of her eyes were slightly reddened. I did not know if it was from the wind or something else entirely. Then she reached up and knocked on my car window. She said, "You have watched the show long enough. Time to come out and clean up the mess." I pushed open the car door and stepped into the sunlight. The moment the crowd saw me, it boiled over like a pot of hot oil. The mustached streamer raised his phone and charged toward me, shouting, "Ethan is here! Family, look! Voyager Group founder Ethan is here in person." I did not look at him. I strode directly toward the company's main entrance. Old Han and a few security guards swiftly formed a human wall around me, blocking the crowd pressing forward. I stepped up onto the front landing, turned around and faced the sea of phone cameras below. Chen Jiangguo saw me come out and, clearly losing his nerve, shrank back half a step. Wang Meilan, on the other hand, was fully committed now. She pointed at my nose and yelled, "You finally dare to show your face. Say it right in front of everyone. Did you cheat? Did you abandon my daughter?" I looked at her and spoke my first words. I said, "Auntie, you want me to say it in front of everyone? Fine. Today, I will make things clear in front of everyone." I pulled a mini projector, roughly the size of a remote control, from my suit pocket. The exterior wall of Voyager Tower had a massive LED screen usually used for playing corporate promotional videos. I connected my phone to the screen's Bluetooth and pulled up 3 audio files from the cloud. I said, "Before I speak, please listen to a few recordings. These recordings were obtained legally. They were extracted from the hallway surveillance of my personal residence. The timestamps and video footage are fully intact. They can be submitted for judicial authentication at any time." I pressed play. The first recording played out. The audio was broadcast through the external speakers of the LED screen. The entire street could hear it with absolute clarity. It was Wang Meilan's voice. She said, "What are you afraid of? The bigger this blows up, the better." The easiest people to fool online these days are exactly those idiots. As long as you stick to accusing him of cheating, no one will bother to check if it's real or not. You just sit on the ground and cry. The more pitiful you look, the better. The moment netizens see you are the vulnerable party, they will definitely side with you. Chen Jiangguo chimed in from the side. He said, "Right, we can find a few live streamers at that point. Just pay them. Make the headline as vicious as possible. Pregnant first wife thrown out of home. Guaranteed massive traffic." Then came the voice of the mustached streamer. He said, "Uncle, Auntie, I can take this job. My livestream room averages 3,000 to 4,000 viewers daily. Driving a narrative is my specialty. 3 days of a negative story fermenting online and his stock price will drop at least 20%. You pay me 50,000 and I guarantee it spreads across the entire internet." Wang Meilan said, 50,000 it is. As long as it forces my son-in-law to come back, any amount is worth it." I pressed pause right there. Below the steps, the mustached streamer's face instantly turned the color of pig liver. He stumbled backward several steps. His phone slipped from his hand and smashed onto the ground. The screen shattered in one corner. The surrounding crowd started pointing their phones at his face. He raised a hand to block them and scrambled to squeeze his way out in utter disgrace. Wang Meilan stood rooted to the spot, her mouth hanging open, unable to close it. Chen Jiangguo's expression looked as if he had just been publicly slapped. The muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably. I pressed the second recording. This time it was Chloe's voice. It was so crisp, it sounded like she was speaking right next to my ear. She asked Mum, "Is that streamer you found reliable or not? Don't let it backfire and cause even more trouble." Wang Meilan responded, "Totally reliable. He is a pro at this. Last time he helped a shady online vendor deal with a competitor and destroyed the other side's business in 3 days. Don't worry. Your dad has already posted over a dozen threads online, all saying Ethan is a domestic abuser and cheater. The comments underneath are all cursing him out. Those idiots believe whatever you tell them." Chloe let out a laugh. She said, "Okay, let's go with that then. Ethan is a guy who cares about his reputation anyway. Once it blows up online, there is no way he can handle it." After the second recording finished, the entire street fell deathly silent. The crowd that had been buzzing moments ago was now completely muted. I pressed the third and most lethal recording. It was Wang Meilan's voice on the phone with the mustached streamer. She said, "Xiao Zhou, let me tell you something.
I have already sent you that photo of Serena.
When you live stream, just say she and Ethan had a fling at the Hilton. Don't worry about having no evidence. Just say the phrase according to an informed source. You are not a law enforcement agency anyway. You won't bear any legal responsibility." The mustached streamer's voice replied, "Understood, understood. As long as you add the phrase allegedly, there is no legal issue. Auntie, you can rest easy. I have taken on at least 50 gigs like this. Never once had a reversal." All 3 recordings finished playing. The big screen simultaneously displayed several freeze frames of the surveillance footage, images of Wang Meilan sitting on my living room sofa, negotiating the price with the mustached streamer, images of Chen Jiangguo holding the cardboard sign and rehearsing the best angle to hold it at home, images of the 3 of them huddled together discussing the details of how to fabricate the slander. I put the mini projector back into my pocket and let both hands rest naturally at my sides. Looking at the dead, silent crowd below the steps, I spoke. I said, "These recordings, along with the pregnancy test archive just presented by Ms. Serena, will all be submitted to the court and public security authorities this afternoon. Everything you have just filmed and heard, feel free to share it far and wide. Do not cut a single word out." With that, I turned and walked through the doors of Voyager Tower. Behind me, the police officers from the local station began leading Chen Jiangguo and Wang Meilan out of the crowd. The mustached streamer was blocked by 2 security guards as he tried to flee. An officer stepped forward and produced a summons before him. He announced, "Zhou Qian, you are suspected of spreading false information online and disrupting public order. Please come with us to the station to assist with the investigation." The mustached man's face collapsed entirely. He turned his head to look at Chen Jiangguo and Wang Meilan, who were also being escorted away by the police. The expression on all three of their faces looked like they had simultaneously realized the exact same thing. They had spent 50,000 yuan to hire someone to weaponize public opinion. And in the end, they had marched themselves straight into the police station. The air conditioning in the lobby was strong. The elevator doors slowly slid shut before my face. The mirrored metal surface reflected my own image. My face carried no particular expression. Not angry. Not exhilarated. My phone buzzed.
It was a message from Serena.
She wrote, "Can we move that coffee to tomorrow? After taking so many knives for you today, I am a little tired." I lowered my head and typed 4 words. "What time tomorrow?" Time is a strange thing. It moves painfully slow when you're weathering storms. But when the reckoning arrives, it cuts like a blade. 3 months. Just enough for the sycamore leaves outside to turn from green to yellow and fall clean away. Just enough for a lawsuit to travel from filing to verdict. The civil courtroom of the Municipal Intermediate People's Court. I sat in the plaintiff's seat. Across from me were Chloe and her attorney. She had lost a lot of weight. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply. Her pregnant belly was now visibly pronounced, impossible to hide even under a loose, dark coat. She kept her head lowered the entire time. Every so often she lifted her eyes to glance at me for a split second before looking away in a flash. When the presiding judge read the divorce decree, the entire courtroom fell silent as if frozen over. Asset division was executed according to the plan I had submitted. Premarital property belonged to each respective party. Joint marital property was split 50-50. Chloe's attorney raised an objection in court, demanding a reassessment of the equity value of Voyager Group. The presiding judge dismissed it on the spot. The company charter and proof of capital contribution that old Joe had prepared in advance played their decisive role. It was written in black and white with absolute clarity. I was the sole founding shareholder of Voyager Group. The number of shares under Chloe's name was 0. That chairwoman title she held had no equity backing whatsoever from a legal standpoint. The gavel dropped. A single crisp ring. My 3-year marriage to Chloe was hereby dissolved. As I stepped out of the courthouse doors, the sunlight outside was so bright it made me squint. Old Joe followed behind me, his briefcase stuffed with case files. A rare smile rested on his face. He said, "Ethan, congratulations. That might be the cleanest divorce case handled in this city all year." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Officer Liao from the Economic Crimes Division. Officer Liao's voice was steady, carrying the detached tone of official business. He said, "Mr. Ethan, I am informing you of an update. Julian's commercial bribery case received its first instance verdict this morning. The amount involved totals 26,430,000 yuan, an enormous sum. Pursuant to Article 163, Section 1 of the Criminal Law, he has been sentenced to 7 years in prison with full confiscation of all personal assets. The defendant stated in court that he will not appeal. 7 years. I stood on the courthouse steps and silently repeated that number in my mind. When he gets out in 7 years, he will be in his early 40s, penniless with a criminal record trailing behind him. His life will be essentially over. Back when he sat beside Chloe threatening to fire me, he probably never dreamed he would end up like this. I said, "Thank you, Officer Liao. I appreciate your hard work." I hung up and relayed the news to old Joe. After listening, old Joe pushed up his glasses. He said, "Once the criminal judgment is issued, the group can initiate a comprehensive audit of all procurement contracts handled by Julian. Part of the embezzled funds can be recovered. The portion that cannot be recovered can still be written off as bad debt for tax purposes." I said, "I'm putting you in full charge of this matter. I patted his shoulder and asked, also, what is the situation with Chen Jianguo and Wang Meilan? He replied, 15 days of administrative detention. The term has already been served, spreading rumors and disrupting public order. If the circumstances had been deemed severe, it could have gone to criminal charges, but since it was a first offense, the local police station issued an administrative penalty. However, I heard that the mustached streamer, Zhou Qiang, was not so fortunate. The police followed the thread and uncovered that he had done over 50 similar jobs before. Several of them involved elements of extortion. His case has already been transferred to the prosecutor's office. I nodded. The law took care of the wicked on its own. Not a single one escaped. At 3 in the afternoon, I drove to a private club in the city center. Serena had asked to meet me here. She said she was bringing someone. I pushed open the door to the private room and saw her sitting by the window. Beside her sat a middle-aged man wearing gold-rimmed glasses. Spread out on the table before them was a stack of project proposals. She stood up and smiled. She said, "Let me introduce you. This is President Han, a partner at Kiming Capital. You mentioned you wanted to connect the South China business with the supply chain in Southeast Asia. President Han happens to have port resources in both Vietnam and Indonesia." I shook hands with President Han. The three of us sat down and talked for an entire afternoon. I had long since witnessed Serena's sharp business acumen. But the level of resource integration she demonstrated today genuinely surprised me. She took Voyager Group's South China warehousing system, Kiming Capital's Southeast Asian port nodes, and her own company's cross-border customs clearance tech platform. She pieced all three together, and it formed a perfectly seamless closed loop for a cross-border e-commerce supply chain. After President Han finished listening to her proposal, he took off his glasses and wiped them. He said one sentence. He said, "Serena, you flew to Indonesia 3 times and Vietnam twice for this project. You even thoroughly mapped out the local customs approval processes. I have seen many people doing business in my life, but rarely have I seen anyone work as relentlessly as you." Serena lifted her teacup and took a sip. She did not respond. She just glanced at me. I knew that look very well. It was not a look of seeking credit. It was more like the look of someone who finally had the opportunity to help you. After signing the letter of intent, President Han left first. Only Serena and I remained in the private room. The sunset outside the window painted the profile of her face in warm gold. She rested her chin on her hand and gazed out the window. Suddenly she spoke. She said, "Ethan, the things I said outside your company 3 months ago, have you really never given me an answer?" I set down my teacup and looked at the side of her face. She continued, "I said I had liked you for 5 years. I said it in front of a live stream room with thousands of people watching. And what did you do? The next day you took me out for coffee and spent the entire time discussing the budget proposal for the South China branch office." She turned her head back to face me. A teasing smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She asked, "Are you really that dense, or are you just pretending?" I was silent for a moment. Then I told her the truth. I said, "You are not the kind of person who takes advantage of someone's vulnerability. And I am not the kind of person who crawls out of one marriage and immediately jumps into another. That would not be fair to you." Serena listened. She did not get angry. Instead, she nodded. She said, "Fine. I give that answer an 80 out of 100. I asked, "Why not 100? She stood up and grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. She said, "Because you didn't say you didn't like me." She walked toward the door. When she reached it, she suddenly stopped with her back to me and said one last sentence. She said, "I have already waited 5 years. 3 more months is nothing." The door clicked gently shut. I sat where I was, looking down at the now cold cup of tea in my hand. I suddenly found myself laughing. On the day I married Serena, the first snowfall of winter blanketed the city. The wedding did not take place in a hotel ballroom. It was held in the glasshouse garden on the rooftop of Voyager Tower. Serena said she did not want anything too extravagant. We only invited close friends and the company's senior management team, in total fewer than 50 people. But old Han and his security crew refused to accept this. They said Boss Ethan's wedding could not possibly be shabby. So they pooled their own money and bought a carload of white roses. They paved a flower path all the way from the rooftop entrance to the ceremony arch. Old Zhao, Director Liu, and the other veteran board members personally served as witnesses. Old Zhou presided over the ceremony. The entire event was not ostentatious, but it was lively and warm, just right. Serena wore a simple satin wedding gown. She did not put her hair up. It hung loosely over her shoulders with a tiny sprig of baby's breath pinned near her temple. When she walked down the flower path holding her father's arm, the snowflakes began to fall just in time. They drifted through the glass ceiling and settled on top of her head like a thin silver veil. I stood on the ceremony platform, watching her approach step by step. Countless images suddenly flashed through my mind. The image of her at that industry summit 5 years ago wearing a grey business suit and arguing supply chain strategies with me. The image of her 3 months ago standing at the company entrance in front of a live stream camera saying, "I do have feelings for him." And the image of her in this very club, her back turned to me, saying, "I have already waited 5 years." She walked up to me and lifted her head to meet my eyes. The makeup artist had applied a very light touch. Her eyes were so bright I could see my own reflection in them. She lowered her voice and asked, "You have been staring at me for almost 30 seconds now. What are you thinking?" I took her hand and said, "I was thinking that I must have done a lot of good deeds in my past life." Old Zhao, standing nearby, could not help but cough. He said, all right. Save the sweetness for later. Finish the ceremony first." The ceremony was simple. We exchanged rings. We recited our vows. Then we signed the postnuptial agreement. Serena insisted on adding an extra clause beyond the standard prenuptial asset gonjink. She stipulated that after marriage, both parties' respective companies would remain independently operated, with no interference in each other's management decisions. As she said this, old Zhou muttered quietly beside her. A strong woman truly is a strong woman. When it was my turn to speak my vows, I folded up the prepared script and put it back in my pocket. I looked into her eyes and said, "Serena, I will not say too many pretty words. 3 years of marriage taught me one thing: trust. Once broken stays broken. No amount of glue can ever piece it back together. But I am willing to entrust all of my trust for the second half of my life entirely to you. Not because I think you will definitely catch it, but because I know, even if you cannot catch it, you will tell me. And then you will figure out a way to fix it with me." Serena's lashes fluttered. Then she laughed. She laughed until the rims of her eyes turned red. She said, "Not bad, Ethan. No script needed. This level of sweet talk could be written into a business school case study." The crowd below burst into roaring laughter. On the 3rd day after our wedding, that package arrived. Serena had gone to the company for a meeting that afternoon. I was home alone opening the mail. I tore open the delivery bag. Inside fell a USB drive and a folded piece of letter paper. On the paper was Chloe's handwriting, crooked and twisted, written in 3 short lines. It read, "Ethan, I'm sorry. I am alone now with the child, and I want to die every day. Watch this video. See what you have driven me to become." I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and clicked on the video file. The footage was very dark. It looked like the inside of a cramped rented room. Chloe was facing her phone camera. Her hair was disheveled, her face frighteningly pale. She held the phone with one hand. On the wrist of her other hand there were several scars, some old and some new, overlapping. Some had scabbed over, some still glistened red. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. She said, "Ethan, do you see this? All of this is for you. You married another woman? What meaning do I have left to live?" The video lasted about 3 minutes. The content was essentially her displaying her scars and crying. Interspersed were a few segments of her speaking directly to the camera. The gist was, if I cannot live without you, and are you trying to force me to die before you are satisfied? I spent 3 minutes watching that video from start to finish. Then I closed the media player. I pulled out the USB drive and threw it into the trash bin together with that letter paper. After doing this, I leaned back against the sofa and closed my eyes. If there was any emotion in my heart at all, it was not anger. It was not pity. It was not guilt. That sensation was more like standing on a riverbank, watching a river that had long since flowed away. That river had once drowned me, frozen me, and nearly swept me away. But now it was far enough in the distance that I could no longer even hear the water clearly. I picked up my phone. First, I blocked every single one of Chloe's contact methods. Then I sent old Joe a message. I wrote, "Chloe sent something again. A self-harm video this time. Archive and file it for me. If any legal risks arise down the line, keep it as evidence." Old Joe instantly replied with 2 words, "Understood." I put down my phone and walked to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. Outside the window, the snow had stopped. The setting sun leaked through a gap in the clouds, dyeing the entire living room a warm amber. The lock turned. Serena had returned. A few unmelted snowflakes still clung to her coat. She switched into her slippers and walked. She glanced at the delivery bag poking out of the trash bin. She asked absolutely nothing. She simply walked over, took the glass of water from my hand and drank a sip. Then she asked, "What are we eating tonight?" I asked, "You cook or I cook?" She flopped onto the sofa with righteous conviction and said, "You cook, obviously." I sat through budget meetings all afternoon. My brain cells are completely dead. I laughed, tied on an apron, and walked into the kitchen. The oil heated up in the wok. Minced garlic hit the pan with a sizzle, and the aroma instantly filled the entire kitchen. Serena was scrolling through her phone in the living room. She suddenly called out, "Hey, old Joe posted something on his Moments. It says you landed another major client this afternoon. The picture is the white rose flower path old Han and his crew laid out at our wedding." "Over 100 likes already." I said, "Tell him to delete it. Keep a low profile." She replied, "Too late." Old Joe commented underneath it. He wrote, "This guy's combat effectiveness doubled after getting married." I walked out carrying 2 plates of food and set them on the dining table. I untied my apron and draped it over the back of a chair. Serena came over, picked up a bite with her chopsticks, and shoved it into her mouth. She chewed twice and gave me a thumbs up. Outside the window, the city lights flickered on one by one, like countless stars scattered across the earth. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, my phone screen lit up. The spam message filter had intercepted a text from an unknown number. The preview displayed the first few words. "Ethan, please, I am begging you, reply to me." I swiped the screen and hit delete. Then I dried my hands and turned around to walk back to the living room. Serena was curled up on the sofa, flipping through a business magazine. When she saw me coming over, she lifted her legs to make room for me. I sat down. She leaned over naturally and rested her head on my shoulder. Her fingers did not stop turning the pages of her magazine. I looked down at her profile and thought to myself, this, right here, is what it feels like to truly be alive.